The market screens flashed red, numbers collapsing into chaos, and Daniel said, "This cannot be happening, everything is vanishing before my eyes." His fingers trembled as he clutched the glass table, feeling the weight of ruin pressing down. Outside, the sound of sirens mixed with the hum of panic, the city itself breathing fear. Rachel said, "Daniel, we can still fight, but you must not lose your head now." He turned, his eyes bloodshot, and whispered, "Rachel, the empire I built is dust in seconds." The TV blared with anchors announcing history's fastest crash, their voices breaking through the thick silence of the room. Ethan said, "Daniel, stop staring at the screen, we need a plan." Daniel laughed bitterly. "A plan?" My fortune evaporated faster than a candle's flame in the storm. He walked toward the wide windows, watching skyscrapers shimmer under the cold storm clouds. Rachel gripped his arm, saying, "Daniel, this isn't just about you. Lives depend on you finding strength." The room smelled of sweat and burnt coffee, tension thick enough to choke. Daniel muttered, "I never thought betrayal would come like this, hidden in numbers." His words cut through the heavy stillness, anchoring the moment in despair. Morning arrived gray and heavy, yet Daniel forced himself into a pressed suit. He said, "The world expects strength, even if inside I'm broken." Rachel walked beside him, saying, "You cannot show weakness, Daniel, not today." The boardroom waited with cold silence, investors sharpening their knives. Daniel's mind raced, every step echoing like a countdown. Ethan whispered, "Breathe, Daniel, they smell fear like sharks in blood." He straightened his tie, eyes hollow but determined. The city outside gleamed in morning rain, mocking his struggle. Rachel said, "This meeting will decide everything we still hold." "Wow, Daniel looked at her and forced a faint smile, though his stomach churned. Inside the conference hall, polished marble floors reflected ambition and cruelty. He muttered, "If I fall today, I fall for good." The door opened, the air electric with suspicion, and Daniel stepped into the lion's den. The man at the head of the table smiled thinly, eyes glinting like steel. "Victor," said Daniel, "we warned you, now your collapse fuels my rise." Daniel clenched his jaw, fists under the table shaking. Rachel whispered, "Don't let him see the cracks." Victor leaned back, voice smooth but venomous. "You built dreams, but dreams don't survive storms." Ethan shifted, his chair scraping loudly, tension breaking the room's silence. Daniel said, "I will not hand over my company to vultures." Victor smirked, "You already have, the papers are waiting." The room seemed to shrink, marble walls pressing in with each cruel word. Rachel's pulse raced, her gaze darting toward Daniel with worry. Daniel whispered to himself, "Not like this, not today." That evening, Daniel sat in his dim apartment, the city buzzing outside. He whispered, "How did everything slip through my hands?" Rachel brought coffee, setting it gently beside him. She said, "Daniel, pain doesn't mean the end, it means you're still alive." He looked at her, eyes red from exhaustion. Ethan entered quietly, placing files on the table, saying, "These are options, but none come without risk." Daniel pressed his palms against his face, muttering, "Every risk looks like suicide now." Rachel touched his shoulder, "You're not alone, Daniel, we're in this fight." He inhaled deeply, staring at the skyline, whispering, "Then I must learn to fight differently." Later that night, an older man knocked on Daniel's door. Samuel said, "I once stood where you stand now." Daniel looked up, surprised, and replied, "Samuel, why are you here after all these years?" The elder ex-banker stepped inside, eyes carrying the weight of regret. Samuel said, "Because I lost everything once, and I see the same storm in you." Rachel whispered, "Daniel, maybe you should listen." Samuel lowered himself into the chair, his voice rough with memory, greed, pride, shortcuts. "These are the cracks that sink empires." Ethan frowned, muttering, "And what do you suggest, Samuel? Another gamble?" Samuel leaned forward, voice steady. "Not a gamble, a reckoning. You must choose who you are before the money chooses for you." Daniel's chest tightened, his heart pounding with both fear and a strange flicker of hope. The rain still fell over the city as Daniel said, I refuse to vanish into the storm. I will rise again. He entered a cramped co-working space, his suit damp, determination written across his tired face. Rachel carried folders close to her chest and said, We start small, but we start. Ethan followed, weary but present, muttering, Every idea is a gamble now. Daniel laid out sketches of a brand logo, his hand trembling but steadying with resolve. Rachel whispered, It's not just a brand, Daniel, it's survival. He nodded, sweat mixing with raindrops on his temple. Ethan exhaled, Then let's face it, like soldiers in trenches. Daniel stared at the table, whispering, Even broken men can build something new. The silence in the room carried both dread and hope. A few days later, Leonard walked into the office with polished shoes echoing. Leonard said, I see ambition, but ambition burns without fuel. Daniel replied, We don't need charity. We need belief. Leonard smirked, Belief is nothing without capital. Rachel looked at Daniel, whispering, He's dangerous but necessary. Ethan frowned, Every coin comes with a chain. Leonard tapped the table, voice smooth, I'll invest, but I'll own part of you. Daniel clenched his fists under the table. Rachel said, Daniel, without this, we won't survive. Daniel whispered, Then we take his fire and hope it doesn't consume us. Leonard's grin widened, the room thick with tension. Late at night, Sophia knocked softly at Daniel's door. Sophia said, I've seen numbers hidden in reports. Leonard's hands aren't clean. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Why tell me this? Sophia whispered, Because lies spread like rot, and you deserve truth. Rachel stepped forward asking, What's the cost of knowing this? Sophia's face hardened. The cost is danger, but silence costs more. Ethan muttered, Another storm waits behind every wall. Daniel said, Then we walk into the storm together. Sophia whispered, Be careful who you trust, Daniel. Betrayal hides in plain sight. The room darkened as thunder rolled. The next morning, Daniel presented his product pitch, slides flickering on the wall. Daniel said, This brand will stand for resilience, built from ashes. Investors stared coldly. One murmured, And what if the ashes still burn? Rachel whispered, Stay steady, Daniel. Ethan tapped his pen nervously, sweat forming on his brow. Daniel pressed on, voice shaking but growing firm. We will not collapse, we will redefine strength. Silence followed, broken by scoffs. Leonard smirked at the corner of the room, his eyes glinting with control. Daniel swallowed hard, whispering to himself, Every step feels like falling. His words echoed louder in his heart than in the hall. In the aftermath of the pitch, Daniel stepped outside into cold air. Across the street, a man shouted at the crowd, I lost my savings in your collapse, Daniel. The man's voice broke, tears streaming. Daniel froze, his chest tightening. Rachel said, He's one of the many hurt by this war. Ethan whispered, Victims never vanish, Daniel. They remind us what's broken. Daniel approached the man slowly and said, I failed you, but I promise not to fail again. The man shook his head, muttering, Promises don't feed families. Daniel's eyes stung with shame as the man disappeared into the crowd. He whispered to Rachel, The cost of rebuilding is carried by those who never chose this fight. The walls of Daniel's apartment seemed to close in as bills piled across the table. Daniel said, Debt is no longer a shadow, it's a storm devouring everything. Rachel placed her hand on his shoulder, whispering, We can still fight, Daniel, but not if you drown in despair. Ethan slammed a file onto the desk, his voice sharp, Numbers don't lie. We are bleeding faster than we can patch the wound. Daniel's chest heaved, his eyes scanning endless red ink, whispering, I built an empire and now I stand shackled by numbers. The rain outside hammered the glass, as if echoing his collapse. Rachel said, Courage is found when the walls crush you most. Daniel replied, Courage doesn't pay debt, Rachel. It feeds illusions. Ethan leaned closer, muttering, If you can't decide now, the debt will decide for you. Daniel exhaled hard, his voice barely audible. Then maybe it's time to let something die before everything dies with it. Victor strode into the office like a predator entering his territory. Victor, said Daniel, every debt you hold is another chain I tighten. Daniel rose slowly, eyes narrowing, and answered, You may chain me, Victor, but you'll never own my soul. Victor chuckled coldly. Souls don't sign contracts, numbers do. Rachel whispered to Daniel, Don't let him twist your resolve. Victor leaned across the table, his words cutting like blades. I'll bury you and wear your ashes like a crown. Ethan shifted uneasily, his fists clenched, muttering, He thrives on fear. Daniel's jaw tightened as he replied, I may lose everything, but I will not bow. Victor smirked, his eyes glinting with cruel satisfaction. The room felt suffocating, every breath charged with menace. Later that night, Samuel sat with Daniel, sipping whiskey in silence before speaking. Samuel said, You remind me of myself when I still believed the system wasn't rigged. Daniel frowned. You lost everything because you gambled on lies. Samuel nodded, his face etched with regret. Yes, but lies wear suits and truth rarely pays rent. Rachel leaned forward, asking, Then why should Daniel keep fighting? Samuel exhaled slowly, because when you stop fighting, you become a ghost among the living. Ethan muttered, spoken like a man who lost more than he admits. Samuel's eyes darkened, his voice breaking. I lost my fortune, my family, my soul. Don't follow me, Daniel. Daniel whispered, Then teach me to walk the line without falling. Samuel closed his eyes, whispering, It may already be too late. Inside the co-working space, tension crackled as Ethan paced back and forth. Ethan said, We are drowning, Daniel, and you're asking me to believe in paper dreams. Daniel replied, Dreams built nations, Ethan, and they can rebuild us. Rachel interrupted, Both of you, stop tearing each other down, we must stand together. Ethan slammed his fist against the desk, growling, Loyalty doesn't pay rent, Rachel. Daniel stood, his eyes blazing. Then leave, if you don't believe. Silence fell, heavy as stone. Rachel said softly, This fight will break us if we turn on each other. Ethan looked away, muttering, Maybe I'm already broken. Daniel whispered, Then let me carry the break until you find yourself again. Victor's message arrived in the dead of night, delivered by courier. Daniel opened the envelope, his face tightening as he read the words. Rachel asked, What is it? Daniel whispered, It's a contract disguised as a knife. Ethan snatched the paper, muttering, He's setting you up to bleed slowly. Rachel clenched her jaw, saying, He's weaving betrayal into every line. Samuel, standing in the doorway, said, I warned you, Daniel, predators never write fair contracts. Daniel crushed the paper in his fist, his voice trembling. He thinks I won't see the trap, but I will burn it before it burns me. Lightning flashed through the window, illuminating the dread in their faces. Silence followed, thick as smoke, and Daniel whispered, The war has begun. The office air was heavy as Daniel's presentation crumbled under hostile glares. Daniel said, The figures don't lie, but they don't define us either. Laughter erupted from across the table, cruel and sharp. Victor leaned forward, smirking, You're finished, Daniel. This was your last hand. Rachel whispered, Stay steady, Daniel, we still have ground to hold. Ethan slammed his fist softly against his thigh, muttering, This is slaughter, not negotiation. Daniel's throat tightened as he watched investors walk out, their suits like shadows leaving him behind. He whispered to himself, I gave everything, and still it wasn't enough. Silence stretched thin, broken only by the sound of closing doors. Rachel placed her hand over his, whispering, The fall isn't the end, Daniel, unless you stop standing. Daniel's eyes burned with shame, yet a fire still flickered deep inside. Later that night, Leonard arrived unannounced, his shoes echoing on marble floors. Leonard said, You need me more than ever, Daniel, and I intend to collect. Daniel's jaw clenched, replying, I will not sell my soul to you. Leonard chuckled, It's not a sale, it's survival. Rachel stood between them, saying, Your money is poison. Ethan muttered, Without him, we're finished, and with him, we're slaves. Leonard's eyes glinted with power as he laid down new contract papers. He said, sign or you fade into nothingness. Daniel's hand trembled, anger and desperation at war within him. Rachel whispered, Daniel, remember who you are. He exhaled sharply, whispering, if I take his hand I may never wash mine clean again. Sophia entered quietly, her coat dripping rain onto the floor. Sophia said, Daniel, Leonard's investments are built on lies. I have proof. Daniel's eyes widened, whispering, proof that could save us? Sophia nodded. Proof that could destroy him, if you dare to use it. Rachel asked, and what price will that truth demand? Sophia's voice trembled. Exposure risks everything, but silence ensures his power. Ethan muttered, every path leads to blood, Daniel. Samuel stepped from the corner, voice heavy, truth rarely saves but it always reveals. Daniel stared at the papers Sophia handed him, whispering, this is either salvation or suicide. Sophia replied softly, sometimes both arrive together. The storm outside roared, echoing the weight of her words. Victor unleashed his strike at dawn, freezing Daniel's accounts and blocking his contracts. Victor said, your empire collapses by my design, brick by brick. Daniel shouted, you cannot erase me, Victor, not while I breathe. Rachel grabbed Daniel's arm, whispering, he wants you to lose control. Ethan growled, this is war, and we're fighting with bare hands. Victor sneered, war is won by those who dictate the rules, not those who resist them. Daniel's chest rose and fell with fury, whispering, then I will rewrite the rules with fire. Samuel muttered, careful, boy, fire burns its wielder too. Victor leaned close, eyes gleaming, burn if you wish, Daniel, I'll watch the ashes scatter. Silence followed, thick and poisonous, like smoke before a blaze. Back in his apartment, Daniel collapsed into his chair, shoulders heavy with defeat. Daniel said, I have nothing left, he has stripped me to bone. Rachel knelt beside him, whispering, you still have us, Daniel, and that is more than nothing. Ethan stood at the window, muttering, but loyalty doesn't rebuild fortunes. Samuel lowered himself slowly into a chair, saying, this is the breaking point, Daniel, the place where men decide who they truly are. Daniel's eyes glistened as he whispered, maybe I was never meant to rise again. Rachel gripped his hand tightly, saying, you will rise because you must, not because you want to. Silence wrapped around them, broken only by thunder. Daniel's voice cracked as he whispered, if this is my breaking point, then let it break me into something new. The storm outside raged, but inside the small office, Daniel's eyes widened as he uncovered forgotten files, hidden deep in old drawers. Daniel whispered, this changes everything. Rachel leaned closer, her voice trembling. What is it, Daniel? He raised the faded document, saying, a dormant account, untouched, with assets worth more than we thought. Ethan muttered, a hidden fortune buried under dust. Samuel stepped closer, eyes narrowing. Be careful, boy. Hidden fortunes come with hidden traps. Rachel said firmly, it could be the second chance we prayed for. Daniel pressed the papers against his chest, whispering, this is not just money, it's a key. Ethan growled, then unlock it before it vanishes again. Thunder cracked as the weight of hope and fear filled the room. Tension snapped as Ethan slammed his hand on the table. Ethan said, you can't risk everything chasing ghosts, Daniel. Daniel shot back, this is no ghost. It's proof that we can rise. Rachel pleaded, stop tearing each other apart, we must decide together. Ethan's jaw tightened, muttering, I've given everything and all I see are ruins. Daniel stepped forward, eyes blazing, then stand with me or step aside. Silence held, sharp as glass. Rachel whispered, loyalty matters now more than ever. Ethan turned away, fists clenched, whispering, maybe loyalty has its limits. Daniel's voice cracked with both anger and pain, then I'll carry the weight alone if I must. That night, Samuel poured a glass of whiskey, his hands trembling. Samuel said, I once had what you now hold, Daniel, and it consumed me. Daniel replied, then guide me so I don't repeat your fate. Samuel's eyes darkened, whispering, greed is not always loud, it is quiet, patient, and merciless. Rachel leaned closer, asking, "So what must Daniel do?" Samuel sighed. "He must decide whether to build with fire or with stone." Ethan muttered, "And fire burns faster." Daniel stared into the amber glass, whispering, "Then I must choose to burn or to endure." Samuel's voice cracked. "Either way, the price is never what you expect." Across town, in a crowded shelter, voices rose against the storm. A man shouted, "We trusted you, Daniel, and we lost everything." Daniel stepped forward, voice shaking, "I will make this right." The man spat back, "Words don't feed starving children." Rachel gripped Daniel's arm, whispering, "These people are the cost of failure." Ethan muttered, "And they'll never forgive." Daniel's chest tightened, whispering, "Then I will carry their anger until it becomes strength." The crowd murmured, their faces etched with pain. Samuel's voice rang low, "Remember, Daniel, victims become either your anchor or your grave." Daniel whispered, "Then let them be the anchor that keeps me from drowning." Victor's smirk glowed across the polished table as he tossed a file toward Daniel. Victor said, surprised, "I orchestrated your downfall from the start." Daniel's face hardened, whispering, "You were the hand behind every chain." Victor leaned back, laughing coldly, "You trusted me once, and that trust was your undoing." Rachel whispered, "Daniel, he's the betrayal you never saw." Ethan clenched his fists, muttering, "Every step we took was poisoned." Samuel's voice rumbled, "Now you see the viper's face." Daniel stood, voice trembling with fury, "You will not bury me, Victor. Not again." Lightning illuminated the room as silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Daniel sat at the edge of his desk, the documents spread before him like a map of destiny. Daniel said, "If there's hope, it's buried in risk, and I will dig it out." Rachel stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder, whispering, "Then let me share the weight, Daniel." Ethan muttered, "Hope and risk are two sides of the same knife." Samuel leaned forward, voice heavy with warning, "Be careful, Daniel. Courage sometimes disguises madness." Daniel's eyes burned as he whispered, "Then let me be mad enough to rise." Rachel said, "We're with you even if the path leads to fire." Silence wrapped around them, heavy and certain, as Daniel's resolve hardened like steel. The next day, Daniel stood before a group of investors, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Daniel said, "This is our final gamble, everything on the line." Rachel whispered, "Speak with fire, Daniel, make them believe." Ethan leaned forward, muttering, "They'll tear us apart if they see weakness." Daniel's hand gripped the edge of the podium as he declared, "We will rebuild not from profit alone, but from resilience carved in fire." Murmurs swept the room, eyes narrowing, some intrigued, others doubtful. Samuel whispered, "He stands on the cliff, one step from glory or ruin." Daniel exhaled, whispering to himself, "Then let me step." Victor entered the hall like a shadow made flesh. Victor said, "Daniel, you wager lives on illusions." Daniel's chest tightened, but he replied, "Better illusions that inspire than chains that destroy." Victor smirked, "Inspiration doesn't pay bills, and dreams don't conquer empires." Rachel whispered, "He's trying to unmake you, Daniel." Ethan muttered, "Don't take his bait." Victor leaned close, voice dripping venom, "I will watch you burn." Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice steel, "Then burn with me, because I will not fall alone." The crowd gasped, the air electric with tension. Samuel whispered, "The storm has reached its peak." Daniel's chest heaved as silence gripped the hall. Daniel shouted, "This is my stand, my risk, my resurrection." Rachel cried, "Daniel, don't lose yourself." Ethan's voice broke, "This gamble could kill us all." Victor laughed coldly, "Then die on your stage, Daniel." Samuel whispered, "The boy walks the razor's edge now." Daniel slammed his fist against the podium, his voice thunderous, "I'd rather die fighting for hope than live enslaved to fear." Gasps filled the room as tension broke like glass. Rachel whispered, "Then let us burn together if we must." Daniel exhaled, his heart pounding like war drums, standing unbroken in the storm. The deal closed with a signature, and silence followed like thunder after lightning. Daniel whispered, "It's done. We've bet everything on this. Rachel gripped his hand tightly, whispering, then we hold together, no matter what comes. Ethan muttered, victory or ruin, the coin is in the air now. Samuel's voice was grave, and when it falls, the world will know who you truly are. Victor leaned back, eyes gleaming. I look forward to watching you fail. Daniel's heart pounded, but his voice was steel. Then watch me rise, Victor, higher than your chains can reach. The room crackled with tension, a storm before triumph or collapse. The ink was dry. The storm outside faded into silence. Daniel whispered, we stand in the aftermath now. Rachel placed her hand over his, saying softly, then we rise from what remains. Ethan muttered, every victory feels like another wound. Samuel exhaled slowly. The weight of fortune is always heavier after war. Daniel's eyes traced the city skyline, whispering, I have gambled everything, and I'm still standing. Rachel said firmly, not alone, Daniel, we stood with you. Ethan leaned forward, tired but loyal, muttering, then let us carry what's left together. Daniel's voice broke with quiet strength. This is not the end, but the beginning forged from ruin. Silence wrapped the room like a fragile peace. Later, Daniel walked the quiet streets, his footsteps echoing against wet pavement. Daniel whispered, this city watched me fall and rise again. Rachel beside him said, and it will remember the fire you carried. Ethan muttered, cities don't remember names, only power. Samuel followed slowly, his voice low, but power fades and only choices endure. Daniel stopped, gazing at neon lights reflecting in puddles, whispering, then let my choices outlast the scars. Rachel smiled faintly, they already do, Daniel, because you chose to rise when falling was easier. Ethan sighed, then let us rise with him, no matter the cost. Inside a courtroom-like hall, Sophia stood tall with documents in her hands. Sophia said, the truth cannot be silenced. Leonard's empire was built on fraud. Gasps filled the room as evidence unfolded. Daniel whispered, your courage saves more than me, Sophia. Rachel said, she gave us justice when we needed it most. Ethan muttered, justice is rare in this world. Samuel nodded, his eyes heavy, but when it comes, it cuts deeper than greed. Sophia whispered firmly, the chains he forged now choke him instead. Daniel's chest rose with pride, whispering, then let truth finish what lies began. Victor sat alone in his high-rise office, city lights blazing below. Victor whispered, I built empires on bones, and still they slip through my hands. Daniel entered, voice cold, your reign ends tonight. Victor smirked, you think victory erases my shadow? Rachel said firmly, shadows vanish when the light endures. Ethan muttered, and yours has already burned too long. Samuel's voice cut deep, you are not a king, Victor, only a man undone by his greed. Victor's smirk faltered, silence crashing like glass. Daniel whispered, this is not revenge, it's reckoning. The city skyline glowed as dawn broke. Daniel stood on the rooftop, wind brushing his face. Daniel whispered, I built, I broke, and I rose again. Rachel said softly, you carried us through fire and storm. Ethan muttered, and those scars remain, we still stand. Samuel stepped forward, his voice rough but proud, and that is what defines victory, not wealth but endurance. Daniel's eyes glistened as he whispered, then let this be the legacy, not riches but resilience. Silence followed, heavy yet filled with hope. The first rays of sunlight touched his face as the screen faded to black.